Bob, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, and my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, let's get right into it. I want to start this episode off and let our listeners kind of know about your soccer background, football background, calcio, whoever's listening from wherever they are, whatever you call it. It's a pleasure to have Bob on this episode because your parents came from Italy and
Mhm.
they moved to Canada. And then at the age of 14, you decided to have a conversation with your parents to say, hey guys, I actually want to go back to Europe, but this time England because I aspire to be a professional soccer player. What did that conversation look like and how did it go for you?
Well, first of all, you've obviously done your research because that's quite detailed. And
I'm quite creepy, Bob. This is now I'm kind of exposing myself. I may or may not have stalked you my whole life.
well, that is perfectly accurate the way you've described that, and it was a real interesting conversation, and to the point where at one stage my mom said to me, she said, "Well, your education is first and foremost, and we need to make sure that that's addressed." And so we didn't figure that out. And at one point she said, "Well, you know what? We just can't do it. We can't let you go. It wouldn't be the right thing to do." And so I said to her, "Well, if you don't let me go, then I'm never going to forgive you for the rest of my life." So a real nasty thing to say, but in the end we compromised. And at that point, no computers, so online teaching was not an option. And I got a big box of books, and I was going to do my correspondence through to grade 12 whilst I was there. I'm sad to say that the box of books never got opened. And, I was far enough away that we had one call a year at Christmas time, just to have a brief chat. But and that is one of my biggest regrets. And over the years, I've had the opportunity to speak to groups of children in schools and soccer organizations. And one of the things I've stressed with them is, do as I say, not as I do, because it would have been easy for me to continue my education, but I had visions of playing at Wembley Stadium, FA Cups, and all those things that kids dream about. And it's one of the biggest regrets that I have, is that I didn't maintain my schooling at that time. And like I said, one of my favorite sayings is youth is wasted on the young. So you don't have the maturity that you have when you get older. But then when you get older, you don't have the body that can allow you to still play. So it's one of those catch-22 situations. But in the end, it did all work out. And I have had a career that has had a lot of peaks and valleys, but I've loved every minute of it. And the one thing that I tried to do throughout the process was avoid getting a real job, because I don't think what I've done is a real job.
Well, it's hard to call it a job when you love what you do so much,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Talk to us about that passion. Talk to us about obviously if you're 14 years old and you want to go overseas and pursue that goal that obviously you were talking about was so important to you. What separated your love for the game so much, maybe from even some other people that made you want to do that and made you have the confidence to do that?
Yeah, I just had the bug. My two older brothers both played, and Sam actually played with the original Whitecaps in the year of the startup in 1974. And my younger brother Danny, came along, and so in one game, the three of us did play in a match in
Cool.
1978. So I think it's the one and only time that had happened in the NASL
Cool.
way back then. So I mean, I just grew up with the sport. I had the passion was, I think, probably the Italian heritage. And the thing that pushed me right over the top, and with the World Cup, in the next couple of months coming up, I we all woke up. I was 11 years old in 1966, and got up very early to watch England play Germany in probably one of the most exciting World Cup finals ever. It ended up 4-2 for England. It went to overtime. Germany tied it in the last minutes of the game. And one of the players that was playing in that game was Alan Ball. So my passion, once the game finished, I said, I am going to be a professional soccer player at 11. And it was a little far-fetched because there was no professional soccer in North America, and it took a while for it to actually get here. And then the follow-up to that story is the guy that I was watching play as a 19-year-old win a World Cup with England ended up coming to the Whitecaps in 1979. And so now I was playing alongside this guy who I watched win a World Cup final. I had to separate the fan in me from being a teammate of this gentleman's because I was just in awe. So I can honestly say that there's never been anything else in my mind. When people, you ask kids what they want to do when they grow up, and a fireman, a lawyer, a doctor. And people did ask me what I wanted to do, and I said I want to be a professional soccer player, and they chuckled. But as I said, I've been blessed and have been able to make a career out of something that there wasn't a lot of options to make a career out of the game at that time.
So does Alan Ball know you were his inspiration? He was
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the first things that I came out of my mouth was the 1966 World Cup final, and it was very interesting because he was a fantastic midfield player, and he always wanted the ball. And I know we've got a lot of time, so I'm going to just repeat this story, which is a great one because obviously he was one of my idols. And so the first game that he plays, we played a very rigid system, and I was the fullback, and you'd play the ball into the front, minimize the risk by playing through the middle of the park. And but he's a midfielder that wants the ball. So he kept coming to me. I didn't see him because I was listening to the coach, and I was just winging it into the far end. And of course, as a midfielder, he then needs to make up the ground to try to support where the ball is going. So at halftime, we come in, and it's Alan Ball, comes down, sits down beside me, puts his hand on my lap, and he says, do you not see me? I said, I didn't know what he was talking about. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I'm coming to get the ball off of you, and you're just hitting it 50 yards, and then I've got to run and support the front. If I ask for the ball, give me the ball. I said, but I said, the coach doesn't want us to do that. He said, don't worry about the coach. I'll look after the coach. When I ask for the ball, give me the ball. I said, you got it. And that was it.
I love that so much.
Yeah,
I love the confidence of a soccer player or any kind of athlete to be able to say that and say, don't worry, I'll handle the coach, but I want the ball at my feet. As a player, I know that I would 100% want to give that other player the ball because I know business would be taken care of.
Exactly. And he did say, look, he said, I might give it right back to you, but we need to try to open up the space to play into, because if the other team knows that we're just hitting it long, they'll drop off, and it'll be difficult to actually hit a ball into the front man. So yeah, great story. And I to this day, I love repeating it because it's something that is a vivid memory in my mind.
So 14 years old, you went to England, you played with a professional club there. And then by the time you're 18, you make the Canadian national team. At that point, what's going through your mind? Or you're like, wow, I'm doing it. I'm doing something that people maybe thought I was crazy, but here I am, and I'm representing my country. Yeah,
it was, and the game that my debut for Canada was at Varsity, the old Varsity Stadium in Toronto. Nice. And we played Poland, who at the next World Cup finished third, and they were a very, very good team. And I happened to have a good match. We ended up losing 3-1, but I had a pretty good match, as did the rest of our team, playing against a side as good as Poland. And then I went back. I actually came back from England, from Reading, to play that match, and then went back again. And it was interesting because Reading were in the 4th division at that time, and it was there wasn't a premiership. It was 1st division, 2nd division, 3rd division, 4th division. So I was getting calls from the daily papers there, and because I think they found it odd that someone playing for Reading had just played against a team that England were going to play against to actually need to beat to qualify for the 74 World Cup. So I was getting asked about Poland and what were their strengths and weaknesses. And 18 years old, it's like, yeah, I'm not a coach. I played and I enjoyed the game. But I just thought, wow, that's pretty impressive. Now the major dailies in England are calling to ask about my thoughts on the Polish team. Ironically enough, I watched England play Poland, and Poland drew with England at Wembley Stadium, but England needed a win, and they got knocked out by Poland.
Was this what was this a qualification for the 76 World Cup?
74 World Cup.
Okay, I want to ask you about this because, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but my dad, so we're Polish, biggest Polish. My whole family's from Poland. I'm the only one born in Canada.
Yes.
I grew up with my dad showing me tapes of this one situation when Bobby Moore had the ball. And apparently the Polish national coach told Lubański, Bobby Moore sometimes takes a first touch and it's a little too far ahead of him. And if you see him do that, anticipate that touch, strip him of the ball, and go 1v1 with the goalie. And it happened in that game. Lubański stripped Bobby Moore of the ball and went and scored that goal for Poland. So Poland ended up qualifying for that World Cup and didn't, and England didn't. So that was a tape that, if I could tell you how many times my dad showed me that on replay, just to be like, if this ever happens in the game, try and emulate what Lubański did. And I'm like, I doubt that I would be in that position. I was a midfielder. But that was just it's so funny that you say that, because that was a big part of my childhood. And I'm sure my dad, when he watches this later, he's going to smile and he's going to say, one day I want to meet Bob and I want to talk to Bob. I have such a feeling.
And we didn't bring that one up very often. We're still dwelling in 66. Yeah. So.
And I should have actually because I'd see your name, and I was wondering what the origin was of that. But yeah, so your dad, there was a striker that ended up coming and living in Toronto, Lato.
Yeah,
that was I think either the top goal scorer at the 74 World Cup, and if not top, up there. And a lot of other players that went on to do very, very well. But I think that was the height of Polish soccer. Yes. It doesn't seem to have hit that, been able to get back to that level since then.
Yeah, there was Boniek, Lato, Kasperczak, Dana. There's a lot of guys that my dad would.
Kazi Dana was a fantastic player. He came to play at San Diego in the North American Soccer League, so I played against him a few times, and he died tragically in a car accident, unfortunately, in San Diego.
It's I hope that Poland in Qatar, has some engine in them, some fire. And, obviously Lewandowski, we talk about him on our show very often, how, he's always in the conversation as one of the best number 9s in the world. But I'm hoping that the rest of the Polish team kind of shows up. And for Liam over here, I'm really hoping that England shows up. It's about time. It's about time.
Liam, you're not old enough to have the sorrow of post 1966, but
no, I had 2018 for the Euros, and I World Cup, and then 2020. So I've had my fair share the last couple, but I've still you gotta believe. But also, all the years before that was significantly worse. So it's getting better.
You're right, and it's kind of unfortunately, if you're not English. You're quite ready to have a go at the English for every time you go to a World Cup. And I'm not suggesting you're doing this thing, but every time England goes to a World Cup, oh yeah, we're going to win the World Cup. Well,
got it.
They haven't won it since 1966, so you need to change them. But they've been close on a couple of occasions, and it is quite shocking that they haven't and the close. Well, Euros was the closest, and it looked like they were going to do that. And then, as far as winning a World Cup, they want to get that monkey off their backs soon. I'm sure.
Well, it's coming home this Christmas.
There you go. The eternal optimism of the English. I love it.
It's number one on my list. Anyway, I had a question actually about when you got called up to the Canadian team. Like, who called you? Like, how did you find out that you were making the team as an 18-year-old?
The coach at that time was a gentleman by the name of Frank Pike, and I just got the call that, and my brother actually, Sam, was playing for the national team. So we ended up playing side by side because he was a center back and I started as a center back. So we were playing together in my debut, which was rather comforting to have your older brother there standing beside you to correct anything that you make a mistake on.
Was it expected? Like, did you think the call was coming, or was it kind of
Well, unlike now, where the depth in our national team squad is at a point where it's never even been close to in the past. Like we could probably run out another starting 11. Wouldn't be as good as the best 11, but it would be very competitive, and we've never had that. So the fact that I was playing in England and was one of three guys at that time, Les Wilson was the other who played at Wolverhampton, and then Bruce Twomley played at Ipswich. But there was three Canadians in England, and there weren't many in any other parts of Europe. So it was almost by default that you're in because you're playing professionally, and not many of the guys were. Most of them were playing senior amateur and would get picked up from those teams.
Now talk to us. Back in the day, what was different? What was the biggest difference within Canada and within the sport of soccer that you see has changed and progressed now? Maybe it's fans, maybe it's interest, maybe it's media coverage. But what's something that you sit back like right now and you say, "Wow, I kind of wish it was like that when I played for the Canadian national team."
Well, the first thing that sprung to my mind as you were speaking, what is different is the length of the shorts, because the shorts, when we played, the shorts were like high, and then we would all chuckle at the guys from the '60s with the shorts down to their knees, and as is the case with fashion, uniforms go the same way because they go long, they go short, they go long. But the longer ones are more comfortable. I can't tell you that because I lived through both stages. Anyways, what is different is the I think it's just the advent of the professional game, and so I'll use the Whitecaps as an example. We invest three million a year in player development, and that's for the most part it's a loss leader because you don't generate any revenue from that. And I'm gonna get to what you might ask me as a result of that. And when you sell someone like an Alphonso Davies, you recoup a lot of that money, but it's still an investment. And so for the young kids that are playing the game now, I had to go to England, and a couple of other players at that time went to England, and beyond that, that would be the case. But the three MLS clubs, Whitecaps, I keep calling them Impacted, but it's FC Montreal, and TFC, all have programs that they heavily invest in player development. And so what we have now beyond that is we have an infrastructure. CPL, great addition to the soccer pyramid, in that the players that aren't quite good enough, and we've already seen examples of players that couldn't quite make the MLS squads that are being bought by MLS squads. And there's a handful of those, and there'll probably be more over time. And then beneath that, League One, which they have in Ontario, is now something that is going across the country. So we have that infrastructure that a soccer playing nation, it's just second nature that you should have that. But we've had to create it, and it's taken from the NASL. Even before the NASL, there was professional soccer. It didn't last long. The NASL was the longest at that time. But even when the NASL disbanded, at that point, then we had the Canadian Soccer League that started up. That was a good opportunity for players to play, and then move on from there, which a number of them did. So we have an infrastructure now, and I can tell you that over the next 4 years, with 2026 coming, 2022 before, and ideally our national team wins the game. Well, actually scores a goal, because we didn't do that in 1986, wins a game, and ideally qualifies for the next round. That to me would be success. And if that happens, and then everybody's in our country is excited, it's then, well, where is the next World Cup? Oh, it's in Canada, it's in Mexico, it's in the United States. And that 4 years will be the focus of the world, because everyone's coming. And at that point, it's 48 countries, not 32. So it's grown it will have grown significantly. So to me, the infrastructure we've got now is going to, I don't know if it'll be different, but I think it'll be more entrenched, it'll be stronger, and that conveyor belt that is there for the best young players to play their way through is going to be providing more and more players that are going to benefit us at the national team level.
So that's one thing that I look back on when I played for the U17 Canadian team, and when we qualified for the World Cup, which was the first U17 World Cup that was ever had for women. We qualified, but we had to fundraise our way to get there, because soccer in our country at the time, and this was what, I don't know, 12 years ago now, it was still developing. Now, hopefully one day, God willing, I have children. I'm hopeful that I'm in a place that if my kids want to play soccer, like you said, they don't necessarily have to go to Europe to become a professional footballer. They can stay here and be in those developmental leagues, which I think is so exciting. And that's where I always tell people, come Qatar. I'm obviously cheering for Canada, but I'm also cheering for USA. Sorry, Liam. I want USA to do well in the group, and same with Mexico, because that's huge for CONCACAF. That's huge for North America. That's huge for the MLS. That's big for the CPL. And the better that these teams do, it does way more for our developmental leagues. So I'm just, I'm so happy to hear that, because as someone who is young and 17 years old, and, the year was 2008, 2009, and soccer was up and coming. And of course there was interest, but it wasn't where it is now. I'm hopeful that in the next, like you said, 4 years, 10 years, this is more of a soccer country than anyone could have ever expected.
Yes, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. I often get over the years from people that are passionate about the sport of soccer, the question, well, why can't it be as entrenched as hockey? And my response to that is, it doesn't need to be. Like, hockey is our national sport. I mean, and it won't be in my lifetime, and I'm not sure it'll ever be, but hockey will always be Canada's sport. Doesn't mean that soccer can't be more mainstream in Canada. And Alphonso Davies doing what he's done, that's probably propelled us even faster to another level, because now we have a player that grew up in Alberta, and I think in his first year, I mean, his ascent was ridiculously fast. And when we had him at the Whitecaps, he came in, and at 14, he was playing for the U7, sorry, 15, 14 or 15, he was playing for the U17s. He was too good within a couple of weeks for that, so he goes up to the next level. Too good for that. Then he goes up to the next level, which is the second team beneath the first team, and he's too good for that within a couple of weeks. So every level he went to, he wasn't just another player, he was one of the best players. Then he gets to the first team, and I vividly remember his first game. He came on and he torched the left back he was playing against. The guy couldn't keep up with him. And so then he makes the moves to Bayern, and the feeling is, okay, it's going to take him a few years. It took him a year, and the next thing you know, he's winning a Champions League medal. Now, the more players that we have, and now he's doing commercials for BMO, and
Yeah, I saw that with the hot dog.
That's the thing that is gold for the profile of the sport. Having someone from our country be a Champions League winner.
Mhm.
And Jonathan David is lighting it up in France. So the more and more players that we have come through, and we will, that go on to that type of high level, it's just going to enhance the profile of the sport. It will enhance more partners to become involved. It will enhance more players growing up with the game, becoming true soccer fans, and building that base of support. So it's the game. The game. I don't want to say the game has arrived in Canada, but I think it's well on its way to establishing itself as as something that more than just the multicultural groups that we have in this country support. And we get the Canadian people that don't have that cultural background to support the sport. And it's happening, and we could see it happening right in front of our eyes.
I think everything you just said, like, made me not realize, but this really couldn't be a more perfect time for Canada to actually go to a World Cup. And it feels like the game is more stable than it's been in a long time. Like, I remember once me and my dad went to an Edmonton game. They were playing the Atlanta Silverbacks at Foot Field, and there was literally 20 people in the crowd. And now I've gone down to the Calgary Cavalry games a couple of times in the CPL, and stadium's full, and like the atmosphere is great. And I guess the question is, like, what do you think the CPL now has to do to continue to grow in that way as well, and like kind of maybe even expand teams and stuff like that? Do you think that's something the CPL has to do to continue to grow, or how do you feel about it, I suppose?
I would caution on the growth side, not because it shouldn't grow, but what you don't want to have happen is expand and then have that regress.
Yeah.
I think you maintain what you've got. And the other thing too is, I honestly believe, and I was the coach of Vancouver 86ers in between the old NASL and MLS. And when we started up, we knew who we were. We were a team in a league that wasn't necessarily full time. We trained in the evenings, but it was an opportunity to stay in the game. And as a result of that, we managed to stick and stay. In the end, that league folded as well. But the financing of the sport it's paramount, because if you don't have the money, you can't pay the players, and if you're not getting people through the turnstiles, then you're light on finances. And so I think you just accept where you are, and where you are in the pyramid of play, and what your function is, and there's nothing to be disappointed about by being a tier down from MLS. It's what happens everywhere else in the world: first, second, third division. So there's no reason why that shouldn't happen here. But just be not be contented, but just know where you fit into the hierarchy, and do the job that has been taking place, which is players going from CPL to MLS clubs. And again, that's what happens in the rest of the world. So, and then beneath that too, the leagues that exist, you're all if you're all in it for the right reasons, you're in it for the player, the player that can actually find his way from youth soccer through the system and then on to Bayern Munich.
Yeah, that's what I want to quickly touch. I don't want to ask you too many questions about Alphonso, but I just feel like he's such a staple. And I was saying this to Gene in our last episode, such a staple in not only Canadian soccer, but now global. He's a global footballer that he's in the conversation for top 3 left backs in the world right now. And he's transcended Canada soccer. And it's just, his story is so unbelievable. Obviously, what his parents have gone through, him being here in Edmonton, going to the Whitecaps, and then signing this unheard of deal with the big Bundesliga club who's obviously a Champions League contender. I don't think we talk about on the show all the time. Bayern Munich doesn't get nearly enough credit as they deserve among other big clubs in the world. But what was it like for you when you maybe saw Alphonso Davies play for the first time and then realize what kind of player you had on your hands?
And he's one of those players where in the first time you see him, you realize, wow, like and then you also take a step back and think, okay, well, let's not all get too excited because it's the first game, but he just kept doing it. And the thing about Alfonso and his family, like one of the most difficult things we had to do in order to relocate him here, his mom said if he doesn't maintain his education, he's coming straight back to Edmonton, and he did, and so she was contented. But there's a strong family unit there, and it's evident in him. He's just a nice young man, and he's obviously feeling pretty good about himself right now, and so he should. But he's still, and I can't say that I've spoken to him since he went to Bayern Munich, but I do feel like he really hasn't changed all that much. Yeah, and if he has a little, then that's normal given the rocketing to the level that he's got to. So, and I think that's why he's become the player he has, because I don't think he's ever thought that, he's that much better than anybody else. He just goes and does his thing. And there's certain things that he did when he was here that you still see now. And I remember thinking early on, his touch, sometimes his touch is not a heavy one. I think it's by design. He'll knock when he knows that he's got green space in between him and the next opponent. He'll knock it a ways in front of him. And I think what he does is he's got that acceleration that he can turn on any time. That what he does is he knocks it far enough ahead in front of him to tempt the defender to come in. And if a defender goes to ground, I don't need to tell you this, Caroline, but if a defender goes to ground, you're done if you don't get the ball. And then the guy goes down and he accelerates and he nicks it and he's gone. And the guy's on his ass and can't catch him. So, but he does that a lot. And it's clearly something that he's doing by design, because he knows he's got that next gear that he can go into when he sees the guy committing to the tackle. So I when I watch him play, it's like watching him play here. He's doing to a better level of player what he was doing to players here, and it really does fit in with what I said earlier, which was any level that he went up to, regardless of his age, he was able to not just be another player. And he did that at Bayern, and he's still doing that at Bayern. Like it's not, his game hasn't stalled or plateaued. Like he just continues to get better and better. And I think that will be the case, given the fact that, is he 20, 21?
He's
I
22.
mean,
Yeah, I think he's early 20s.
early 20s. So he's got a fantastic career ahead of him.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We love Alphonso Davies here. We're big fans.
Mm-hmm. So he should be.
How is he embraced by the players? Like, obviously, sometimes you can kind of get those young guys who come in and then, they're as skilled as they are. And maybe the older guys don't always like, not arrogance. I feel like that's the wrong word. I feel like, you know what I'm trying to say, but like, did they like having him around as a young guy, I guess? Was he welcomed?
I wasn't in the changing room, but I can tell you this, and it's a great question, because it also leads to something that is not necessarily just a soccer problem; it's a societal problem. Like if a kid, if a kid or a young adult goes and wants to get into law school and comes out, you know, he may not just want to be another lawyer. He may want to be a partner. And so many times in whatever career paths are chosen, you see this sense of entitlement. without really, wanting, understanding that you need to earn your stripes. This is archaic, but when I go back, when I was in England and I went there as a 14-year-old, my first day, I was taken into the boot room by the groundskeeper. He was my boss, not the coach of the team. When I trained, he was my boss, but the groundskeeper was my boss because I was the apprentice. I was an apprentice. So I thought, okay, he was taking me in to show me where I put my boots. He said, well, no, that row of boots there, that's yours. You need to make sure that they're polished for when the senior players come in the morning. I said, well, okay. And then he took me, they have communal baths at that time. Like all the players hopped into the communal bath. And he said, after training, you need to clean out the communal baths. And then your last chore is after a first team game, you need to sweep the terracing. These were all the things I was doing in the afternoons. And it was, it was a way to find out, I think, about character, like if, how you reacted to those kinds of things. So, and if I was in the changing room, I didn't really speak to the senior players. I waited for them to speak to me. And it wasn't just me because I was a Canadian kid. It was just the hierarchy. Maybe a bit extreme, but now we've gone the other way, and you've got young players coming in and feeling like, okay, well, when do I play in the first team? Well, you have to earn your right to get there. Alphonso never gave anyone the impression that that it had gone to his head, and as a result, all the players just gravitated towards him because he never ever illustrated that he was anything other than a young player who was doing really, really well, but needed the help of all the senior players and the coaching staff. So he was not the exception, but an exception. And there's others like him. But unfortunately, what we have is we have a time that we live in now where earning your stripes is not necessarily something that that happens, or not that happens, but is expected to happen for kids that are coming up, and again, any profession, not just football.
Love it. I want to kind of quickly go back to your experience at the '86 World Cup. What was that like for you?
When I saw the draw, or actually witnessed the draw, and Belgium, Croatia, and Morocco, and Belgium first, I actually likened it to our first game, which was against France, who at that World Cup were one of the favorites to win it. They had Platini, Jerez, Anna. It was a very good squad. So it was a bit nerve-wracking, and but what an opportunity. And so I remember standing in the tunnel. And when I say I liken it, I should finish that thought, because I think Belgium are, I don't know what they're ranked now, but they were 2 or 3, and I think they're in the top 5, which would have been comparable to France at that time. And so you've got an opponent that is one of the best in the world, and you've got some individual players there that all of our players are going to know about, and in fact, probably know most of them. So for us, standing in a very narrow tunnel in the stadium in Mexico, and Platini was the captain, Bruce Wilson was our captain, I was behind him, and the tunnel was that narrow that you could actually reach out and touch them. And I remember looking at Platini and looking at the players behind him and thinking to myself, wow, like I watched these guys play for their club teams, for their national team, and now we're going out to play a game against them, but not a friendly, a meaningful game, a World Cup match. And you had, and once again, like my first interaction with Alan Ball, I had to stop myself, and I'm sure our players did, stop ourselves from being fans and realizing, okay, let's get focused here and see what we can do. On the way to the game, I should add this, on the way to the game, the Mexican fans have this thing where they all line up where the buses are coming in for quite a distance. And what they do is they'll put up their hands up to illustrate the score. And most of them were going up like that. And so it was like, whoa. Not much is expected of us, right? And understandably, because it was the first time we were going to the World Cup, we didn't have a professional league. And so, anyways, we go out onto the field and the game starts. And I remember settling in and feeling like, okay, I'm not awestruck anymore. And I think the same thing happened with every one of our players. And there was an instance that took place in the first, had to be within the first 10 minutes. And a ball got knocked, and I was at right back. A ball got knocked in behind me. And the French player, which was the guy that actually scored the goal, Papin, he cut across me and was in the box.
Okay.
And he was smart, because what he did was he was on an angle, so he wasn't really in with a clear goal scoring opportunity. He just stopped. He stopped, and I was just running back at full speed, and I bowled him over, like literally bowled him over. Went down, and then I'm thinking to myself, "Oh no, I've conceded a penalty." And then I'm listening for the whistle, and then I look up at the ref, and he's going, "Play on," and I was like, "Oh, hallelujah!" No VAR either, thank God.
Thank God. You know what? Knowing VAR, Liam and I were joking before the show. VAR would still probably get it wrong back then. Maybe it would have been worse.
There you go. So I dodged and we dodged that bullet, and then we settled in, and we actually had a couple of chances, and it wasn't until the 81st minute that they got the go-ahead goal. And unfortunately, I was involved in that because it was a long high cross by I remember the Val Fernandez, very good midfielder, hung it up at the far post, and I was underneath it. And then our goalkeeper, Paul Dolan, who had been incredible, still the youngest goalkeeper ever to have played at the World Cup, Paul Dolan. He comes to collect it, gives the shout, and he thinks there, I think he's there, and the altitude messed with the ball, and he was underneath it, and I had stopped, which is a cardinal sin for a defender. I shouldn't have done, because I could have headed it for a corner. And their attacker didn't stop, and he went in behind me and headed it back across the goal line, and Papin had it happen. So it was unfortunate. We ended up losing on it, but even after that, we still pushed forward, and we're looking for the equalizer. And there's a great shot, because every World Cup, and I love watching them, they do their documentaries. And the 66 World Cup, I watched that like 15 times, because I just love the whole sequence. But they're all very, very well done. And then they talk about Canada very briefly, because we didn't last very long, but I said we gave a good account of ourselves. And then they show the goal that the French scored, and Platini is actually, there's like this sigh of, and it was like, because a draw for them at that against us would have not been acceptable in France, because we were supposed to be cannon fodder for them. But there's the irony of also how you prepare yourself, because we were all scared. And I think sometimes scared is a good thing, because as long as you can get over that feeling when the opening whistle goes, it's a good motivator. And then we watched, right after our game, we watched Hungary play Russia, who were the other two teams in our group. Russia annihilated Hungary 6-0, and it could have been 10. So we're watching this, and then all of a sudden we go from being scared to thinking we're playing against Hungary now. Like they were terrible. And we're thinking, not that we need to go in with the same attitude that we did against the French, but we're going out and we're thinking, okay, let's just go and play. And it was a mistake. They scored after like 10 minutes, and they ended up beating us 2-0. So that, then we play Russia in the third game, and there's nothing at stake anymore, because we can't go through to the next stage, but still, wanted to give a good account of ourselves. They beat us 2-0, but that game is most memorable for me and others as well, that placed a bet, because the odds makers before us going to the World Cup were giving really good odds against us scoring a goal. So if we scored a goal and you put some money down, you would have done well.
Right.
And a few people did. Well, the best chance, and I still get reminded of this 36 years later, every now and again, and you cost me money because I would go up for corner kicks. I'm at the near post, ball goes over my head, down to my feet, just around the 6-yard box. The ball's there, and it's actually on not my best foot, but it's on my left foot. And so I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm not gonna have a lot of time. I got to get the shot off. So I touched it out and hit it, and I stubbed the turf.
The worst.
The ball kind of just trickled to the goalkeeper. Goalkeeper did me a favor because he actually dived for it, which he didn't have to do, but he made it look a little bit better. But nevertheless, my reaction afterwards is I just kind of put my hands by my side, feet together, and I wanted to just fall back into a big hole that would take me away. So yes, I could have scored a goal, and who knew that it would be 36 years later that we'd still be talking about, that our guys that are going there, someone is going to have the distinction of scoring the first goal for Canada at the World Cup. That could have been mine.
Oh, well,
Who do you think it'll be?
Yeah, I was about to say, who do you think it's going to be?
Who do you think is going to score the goal?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Liam.
Who do you think is going to score the goal for Canada? Who do you?
There you go. I think it could be any one of. Well, Kyle Larin obviously had a good run. Jonathan David is you give him a chance in the box, and 9 times out of 10 he'll score. Alphonso, but anytime you go for the obvious choices, it ends up being someone. Could be Steven Vittoria from a corner kick. Who knows? But whoever does score that first goal will have that distinction for the rest of his life.
They'll keep you in mind, I'm sure. They'll say, Bob, that one was for you.
Yeah, well, it'll be nice. No, you know what? It actually, even when it comes up, at least people are talking about it, so that's okay.
We have a question from a Twitter follower when they found out we were talking to you. And it's interesting that you brought up the comparison for this Canadian team playing Belgium to your experience against France. He said, how can Canada not feel overwhelmed by the moment of playing in a World Cup against a powerhouse like Belgium? Well, what advice would you give to Canadian players in that moment where you yourself were standing in that tunnel and you're like, oh my God, it's Platini.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's Kevin De Bruyne. Like, oh my God, it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I actually think I answered that question, but I'll summarize it again. I just think get over the being the fan when you're in the time. And I mean, our guys, and especially players like Alphonso, none of us were playing in or had won a Champions League medal, not even close. And Jonathan David, and all these guys are playing at the top clubs, and the rest of them are either in MLS or they're in MLS. So they're all coming across very good players. So I'm not sure that they'd have the same type of feeling that we had going in, because for us, we just never had anything like that. But I'm sure that there will be a little bit of it, and I think that when the opening whistle goes, you're focused. You understand what's being asked of you, and I do think that and we had a fantastic coach at that time, Tony Waiters, who I had coached me with the Whitecaps when we won a soccer bowl championship in '79. And he was very, very much had attention to detail. And I know that John Herdman is the same, if not even more of that way. And I mean, I was really impressed with John in games where he changed actually the formation of the team on the field and show different looks. And I'm sure he's going to go into that game with an understanding that, okay, let's make sure when we don't have the ball that every one of the players understands what their role is, wherever they are on the pitch, as it relates to where the ball is. And if and it's kind of cliche, but make sure nothing devastating happens early on, because if all of a sudden they get one in the first 10 minutes, their tails are up, and you're feeling like, oh dear, now we're on the wrong end of this.
Yeah.
So, but the final thing I would say is, don't come off the pitch feeling like you didn't do what you were capable of doing, because you just ended up being a bit frozen by the moment, because it's a fantastic opportunity. And if we knew that we would be the only ones 36 years later that would ever have that opportunity, I don't think any of us would have believed it. But you can talk to any one of the players that played on that 86 World Cup squad, and they will all tell you that it was a moment that would rank as one of the best in their playing careers and maybe in their lives.
Amazing.
I wanted to talk about actually the qualifying for the 86 World Cup. So
Yes.
like it was a little bit different than it is right now, right? Like, so what was it? There was 2 groups, and then the winners went in 3 groups, and the winners went into a final group. Is that kind of how?
Yes, we started off. Actually, there was a group and then the final 4.
Okay.
We started off with I think it was Haiti, and then I think it was Guatemala. But just to give you an idea of the difference in interest, we played those 2 games in Victoria, and at Royal Athletic Park, that has a capacity of, if 5,000, that would be tops. And it was full, and the support was very patriotic. But you look at what we had throughout this round, and the support, in spite of the frigid temperatures in your backyard, it almost became, this qualifying became about the tough Canadians to be able to go and play, in those temperatures with the snow. And of course, there's the now iconic jump into the snow.
Yep.
By Sam Adekubi and the rest of the players. So at that stage, we got through that round, and then it was, and I'll kind of breeze through it. We played against Costa Rica at varsity. We ended up drawing 1-1, which was a bad result, given that we had to now go to Costa Rica and to Honduras. And but we made up for that dropped point by winning in Honduras, getting a draw in Costa Rica, and then going to Newfoundland to actually qualify for the World Cup in a stadium that wasn't a stadium.
Oh, wow.
It was actually created, and there were 7,000 people there. There was bleachers that were brought in, and but it was a fantastic experience. We were there for a week before the game in preparation. But the best part is, I should go back to, because our coach and the president of the association, who resides in Edmonton, Jim Fleming at the time, they decided that they'd pick a spot, because whenever we go and play, so we go and play in Mexico, they play us at high noon in the extreme heat. And the one time that we played there, we went to Toluca, which is the highest altitude in Mexico. So they always use the opportunities that they have at their disposal to make it difficult for the opposition. So our guys, Tony and Jim, decided that we go to Newfoundland, and so the Hondurans were scrambling for a map to find out where is Newfoundland. And so it was a great choice, because it was the game, and we needed to draw to get through, and in the end we won it. But it wasn't as cold as it could have been, but it still was uncomfortable for the Honduran players. And we managed to get the right result, and I went back to Newfoundland about 4 or 5 years ago. So, and they're still celebrating that they hosted the game that took us to the World Cup, and the one and only World Cup we've ever been to. And we went back to the park, and I said to them, this can't be the park, like, because there was residential housing where I thought the seats were.
Oh,
And, and so I'm saying, well, you sure this is the park? And he said, yeah, no. And there was a plaque on one of the walls to say this is where Canada qualified for the 1986 World Cup. So it was very nostalgic to go back there. And it was also very gratifying that that they were all so proud of the fact that that they were the ones that that hosted us in getting to the World Cup.
that's so. Do you get emotional at all? Do you ever sit back sometimes when you watch the World Cup and shed a tear? Be honest with us. Say this podcast.
I am an emotional person. I'm of Italian descent, so that I think that comes with the territory. But I don't. I know I never shed a tear, but I get goosebumps for sure. Yeah, it's you're watching. You think, oh yeah, you were there and you participated in an event that I don't think anyone could argue with globally that it is the biggest sporting event in the world. And the fact that it's going to 48 countries means that that level of interest will expand by another 16, with the countries that are there.
Did you witness the hand of God?
Oh, I'm enthralled by all of that.
Okay, talk to us, Bob. I'm
Yeah,
glad that we got that in there.
no, yeah, I just think it was so obvious, and I can still see Peter Shilton, uh, saying like it was a handball. And so the one thing that I will say though is he, in spite of the fact that he cheated, he had a great line, and I don't know if either of you have seen this, and I know Liam, you might have heard this. Um, so he did an interview, and he said, somebody asked him, said, did you cheat? And he never strayed. He said, no, hand to God, with a smirk on his face. And then he said, because Peter Shilton had said, what a cheat, and he really went after him. And so Maradona says, looking into the camera, he says, Peter Shilton. He says, yes. And it's through the translator. He's, very righteous individual. So if I were to ask Peter Shilton, if I headed one towards goal and he made the save, but the ball trickled and it trickled over the line and he pulled it back out, do you think Peter Shilton would go to the referee and say, no, that was a goal. That was a goal. And so I just thought that's very interesting that you've kind of turned it on him. And then the game itself, if you're going to cheat and do what he did, okay, but then you turn around and dribble through virtually the whole English team and score one of the best goals ever at the World Cup, at any World Cup. Yeah, he could quickly get you talking about that as opposed to the hand of God.
Yeah, it's always funny that, isn't it, that those two goals were in the same game and
unbelievable.
Like if I feel like the story would always be a lot different if he didn't go on and do that right away. I always remember Maradona did a charity game in England, in Manchester, probably like 15 years ago now, and he was just one of the managers, and he endless boos for 90 minutes, just everybody just booed in, and it was like, but you can never deny how good he was, right? Like he was arguably the best player ever.
He's my decision for greatest player to play. Obviously,
I will never admit that.
Yeah, obviously the hand of God being one, it's iconic. Everyone who knows football knows of that moment, but two, also I always say on the show what he did with Napoli and how he brought Napoli on the map and just how he basically ended up winning the Scudetto and everything with Napoli. And hopefully Napoli does it again this year in Serie A for Maradona. But
doing well.
Yeah, they're doing pretty well. So yeah, I don't know. I just think that it's crazy. Like to think that, Bob, you were at that same World Cup where arguably that's probably the most iconic moment in football goals, at least.
When you were there, what was it like outside of this, like not playing? Like what was the environment like in Mexico, and did you interact with like other teams and stuff? How's it kind of go?
No, you are.
I don't think so.
Well, what and So what happens is the group you get drawn into, that's initially where you base yourself out of, and then you're there in advance of the games. We played in Irapuato and Leon,
Mm.
and the hotel that we stayed at built a grass pitch. So there wasn't a pitch there before, and it was a fantastic grass pitch, and they started that well in advance. So we walked out of our hotel rooms and straight to the pitch. So we were very isolated. You didn't see the other countries because they would have the same setup, and it will happen, when it's hosted here in Canada. Teams will come in and they will have a predetermined site with a pitch and all the necessities that are required to be there for a length of time. So yeah, we didn't have a lot of interaction with others other than on the match days.
You mean you didn't play checkers with Maradona or chess?
No, unfortunately not. Unfortunately not.
One quick question before we let you go, Bob, because we appreciate your time so much. What's something about this Canadian team right now that might shock their opponents? Because obviously the experience is lacking on this Canadian national team, and experience is huge and very valuable at tournaments. But I do think that they have a lot of special players, and they are a special team that maybe can surprise viewers and opponents.
There's no doubt they can. We're going into this World Cup, and I don't want to suggest with unrealistic hopes. But when we went into the last one, I mean, our it wasn't our goal, our objective, and nobody actually spoke about it. But I know that I felt we just wanted to be competitive, and then beyond that, whatever happened would be a bonus. And we were competitive. We were in every game, and the Hungary game is the one that we kind of threw away because we went into it with the wrong attitude. But this group, the problem is, and I think you're right, Caroline, in that we haven't been for 36 years. So is there an element of surprise there because we haven't been on the World Cup stage for that many years? And I think there is, with the group of players. But if you're in the football world and you're in it and you're the coach of any one of the three opponents that they're going to play against, you know who Alphonso Davies is, you know who Jonathan David is, and there's others, Kyle Larin, that there's guys that are doing it in Europe that will have a profile. So we have an element of surprise, but we don't really, because if you don't prepare properly for Canada, then you might get caught as a result of that. So my belief is, and I'll say what I said at the outset, which is you want to be competitive, which we're going to be. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And then this is interesting too, because, and I'll use the hosting of the 1994 World Cup in the United States. I remember talking to people that weren't necessarily soccer fans, but their expectation of hosting a World Cup and their country in the World Cup was that they were going to win it. Because they just didn't have any idea that the rest of the world had been playing soccer for a long time, and there were established countries, and there's a handful of countries that win World Cups. So they went into that World Cup, and the purists understood. So the fact that they got through to the second round, that was, in my eyes and most people's eyes in the game, that was a great achievement. But for the non-soccer fans, like, what? We're celebrating getting through the first round? That's not American. So in our case, my hope is that people understand that it's still going to be difficult. Yes, we did very well in the qualifying. We finished top of the group. We outplayed Mexico. We outplayed the Americans. But now we're going into the World Cup, and I don't know if I want to suggest the opposition is significantly better than Mexico or the United States, but it's for all the marbles. So I'd like to try and set the expectations for the non-soccer fan out there to suggest, hey, if we're competitive throughout it, if we can, well, and we're going to score a goal, so that's not even a debate. But if we can get a win and a draw, then I think we got a chance of getting through to the second round, and that's my objective. And I doesn't matter what my objective is, but because I don't want to stifle John Herdman's objectives either, because they may be different. But for me and for all the people in our country that tune in and aren't soccer fans, that would be considered a success for me.
Liam, any other questions for Mr. Bob here?
No, I think it's just an exciting time right now for Canadian football fans to actually see this team at, like you said, they're not just going to go into this tournament and roll over, and they're not excited. They're excited to be there, but that's not the only objective. Like, there's still a lot for this team to play for. And I think it's exciting. Like, what are we now, 2 months away, and it's going to be good. Thanks a lot for coming on and talking with us about it.
No, my pleasure. And the other thing that we should note is the Olympic gold that the women won, and how healthy that program is. And so when you suggest we're at a perfect time, because men, women, the growth of the game, it's all happening, and it's just nice to be around to enjoy that.
Perfectly said. That's what Gina and I were talking about last episode. I said we're at a time where both the men and women, it's exciting all around. It's just an exciting time to follow soccer here in Canada. And, we follow the MLS. My dad and I have had season tickets for Toronto FC since the first season. And just to see the growth of MLS, and now the Canadian women winning gold, and some of my teammates on that team, and I'm so proud of them and happy for them in their journey. And now the Canadian men going to Qatar. It's an unbelievable time for someone who, Bob, like yourself, has the resume that you do. And then, fans and of the sport like Liam and I, to just sit back and see everything that's happening in this country. So I'm excited. We say often on this show that we think Canada, people aren't considering Canada and the talent they have in their squad enough outside of Canada in the conversation of maybe potentially getting out of that group stage, because, Eustáquio, he's playing for Porto, a couple guys on Club Bruges who are playing Champions League soccer, Larin and Buchanan. Everyone knows Alphonso Davies, our goalkeeper. It was a big reason why, we got through Mexico. So I just think it's a really good squad. And if they can just contain their nerves, maybe we have something really cool to celebrate. And Bob, when that first goal is scored, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to send you an email and say, I want you back on the podcast to talk about that first goal scored.
Sure. No, that would be wonderful. And the one thing that I just want to circle back on, Liam, what's your background? Have you played? And you play?
I play. I don't play well. I play, but I grew up in Bolton. I moved to Canada.
Oh, Bolton. All right.
So Bolton Wanderers fan. Luckily, I was there when they were good and in the Europa League and all that kind of stuff. So not as good right now, but we're doing better.
Bolton, and I've lost track. Where are they?
We're in the Northwest. So actually, it's funny.
No. I know where they are.
Right.
But where are they?
We're in League One now. We're fifth.
You're in League One. Okay. So
League One.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had some.
That's a long way from where they were.
Yeah, it is. But
not that I want to rub it in.
It's okay. We were a lot further away 2 seasons ago. So now we're on the up. We got some financial stability now. We got a lot of international players. Like we're the only team in League One, I think, that had to have that game postponed this weekend because of the international players.
That's a good thing. Then.
No, it's a good thing. So we're on the up. It'll only be a couple of years.
All right.
Liam's probably one of my only friends that watches the game as much as I do, and we share this, crazy knowledge for the sport. So he's been awesome to do this with, and we both appreciate you so much in your time, because we've taken up too much of it, but it's been too good of a conversation.
Love to talk about the game. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks.
Yeah. Bye-bye then.